Learning how to use training mode is one of the most important things that can help you improve in fighting games. Getting everything out of the training mode is a task unto itself. And so this video here is designed to help you learn how to use everything available to you in Street Fighter 6. Let's get going. One of the toughest things about this training mode is you look at this and you'll notice right from the get-go, there are 8 pages of settings here. This is one of the most robust training modes that you have ever seen in your entire life. And there are 8 pages here. There are basic settings, environment settings, dummy settings, recording settings, reversal settings, parameter settings, screen display settings, simple training settings, and finally back to basic settings. One of the first things that you're going to learn right away is as you're navigating these menus, and for example, you want to go and change your dummy settings, and then you want to set reversal settings, you're like, where is that? Where is it? Is it the what page? And you're like scrolling through all the page. How do I find the setting? And it's very, very confusing because there are so many pages. One of the things that I personally recommend is if you look at the bottom left of the screen, you'll actually see an LB plus RB go to basic settings, which means no matter what page you're on, as long as you hit those 2 buttons, you always go back to basic settings. This actually allows for easier navigation of the training mode menu. So one of the things that I have done in these demos here, in these betas, is I have learned how far away from the basic settings page that the settings that I want to access are. So for example, the dummy settings I know is always 2 pages to the right of the first page. That means no matter what page I happen to be on, if I reset to the basic page and then hit right twice, I know I always go to the dummy settings. So this is my recommendation for you guys here, is to try to memorize the pages this way. For example, I know the reversal settings is 4 pages left or right because it's in the middle. But that way, no matter what page I'm on, as long as I hit the 2 buttons to reset and then 1, 2, 3, 4, I will always be at the reversal settings. If I reset and hit left 1, 2, 3, I will always go to the parameter settings over here. This is actually a recommended way, in my opinion, to navigate these menus to make it a little bit easier to access all of these pages. So as you can see here in training mode, there are a lot of options here. And navigating through all these options is definitely fairly difficult to do. However, they have included on the main page here for the basic settings something called shortcut settings. Now, if you access shortcut settings over here, you'll see a bunch of things that you can turn off and assign commands to. This will help you be able to access a lot of things a lot easier. For example, if you're always trying to change the state of your opponent's block settings, you can see one of the shortcuts here is block settings. And so if you turn this on, now you have access to this. One of the things that you'll see here at the top is an ability to assign a function button over here. I have assigned my function button on my joystick to the bottom right button, aka 3 kicks button on a standard joystick layout. So as you can see here, I can assign it to whatever button I want, but I've assigned it to that particular button. Now what this allows me to do is essentially use the function button like a shift key. So now I can assign a bunch more shortcuts to the limited buttons that I have on my controller. So for example, for block settings, I want to set it to the heavy kick button. So if I hit the confirm button over here, you can see as long as I hit the function button, it toggles whether it requires a function or not. After it's on, I can press any of the other buttons to assign it what I want it. So if I assign it to heavy kick like this, and then after this, you make sure that when you hit the start button to come out of this, you see that there's the Y button symbol next to there. If you hit that button, which on my joystick is the medium punch button, you'll see that it turns that shortcut on. Now, if you take a look at this really quick, he is assigned to not block by default over here. So if I kick him, he is not gonna block. But now, if I hold the function button and hit heavy kick, you can see block settings change to block all in the bottom right corner. And now he is going to block everything. If I do it again, it cycles him to block count, which if you actually look here is set to 1. So he'll block one thing and then get hit by the next. If I shift it again, you'll see block after first hit. So if I mistime a combo, he'll block. And then finally, if I shift it, it'll be random. And whether he blocks will be completely random. And if I hit the function plus heavy kick again, I'll go back to no block right here. So I can change the status of my opponent's blocking with these shortcuts using the shortcut settings here on the main menu. Again, the function button is really important here because it gives you access to a bunch of stuff. For example, you see here, I have some assigned to save status and also replay status. And I'll show you what this does in just a little bit. But this gives you access to your favorite settings, the ones that you change the most. As you can see, there are a ton of options here for you to set these shortcuts to. The function button settings is definitely one of the things that you want to use, however, to get access to the fastest ability to access some of these options. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty of all 8 pages of options here in the training mode, one of the first things that you should learn how to do right away is how to reset training mode. Now, by default, it might not be a button available on your controller or on your joystick. So remember, in the shortcut settings that we talked about a little bit earlier, there is an option here for restart battle over here. This is a very, very important button. Make sure it's assigned to something that works and have it ready to go, because from there, if you hit the reset button, it always brings you to a default state. However, that's not all this reset button is capable of doing. There is a lot of convenience here that if you hold a certain direction on your D-pad or on the joystick, you can reset to a whole bunch of different locations. So for example, if I hold right and hit the reset button, we start on the right side in the corner automatically. Now if I hold left and hit the reset button, I start on the left side. However, if you notice, I'm always on player 1 side. So here I'm starting in the corner. So if I wanted to test stuff on the left side with the opponent in the corner, I gotta jump out, etc., etc. Actually, that's not true. They thought of that as well, and if you hold down diagonals, that actually swaps the sides. So for example, if I want to start on the right side, but instead have me be player 2 and be in the corner, I can actually hold down and forward at the same time and then press reset, and voila, I'm second player. If I hold, well, I'm in the second player position, I'm on the right side. If I hold down and left and reset, same thing. I will be on the right instead of the left. And so this way I can choose any configuration I want. I can start in the right with me on left side, on right side. I can start on the left on left side, or start on the right side here. And one of the cool things about this is every time I reset, so let's just say I move myself to the middle of the screen, every time you hit the reset button while leaving the controller in neutral, you always go back to the last location that you input with the controller. So if I go to the left side over here, then no matter what, every time I reset, I'll always go to the left. But then the question is, how do I reset to the middle? No problem, they got you covered there too. Hold straight down, hit reset, and that actually sets the default back to the middle. Now, what if I want to be over here and be on the right side instead? There's no diagonals, right? Well, you know what? They're still up. So if you hold up and reset, voila! Middle of the screen, middle of the stage, and you are on the right side. So again, this is going to be one of the most important things in training mode, because if you're practicing something in the corner here, for example, and you try to do something and it sets up like this and you want to go right back to it, very easy to go to these default states. Being able to reset the training stage is going to be one of the most fundamental things for you to be able to have access to. Not only does it reset you into a known position and, you know, corner practice, etc., but for some characters who have character specific settings, you have the ability to reset those. For example, Kimberly, when she throws the spray can, she only has 2 of them and you get down to 0. So if you want to practice a sequence with 2 spray cans, if you use the training reset, that also resets meters like that. So very, very valuable tool to have here. So again, make sure that in the shortcut settings, one of your buttons is set to restart battle here, and make sure that it is turned on. All right, now let's take a look at all of the pages here we have available to ourselves in training mode. One of the first options that you'll see on the basic setting page is this concept of save status and replay saved status. This is basically what save state was in Street Fighter V. So basically, if I'm trying to, for example, test a full screen situation here where I want to dash in, but then I don't want to backdash full screen every single time again to get back into the test position, I can actually go to the menu, use the confirm button, and when I press it here, it saves the current state. Now, if I try to do something here, and I dash forward and I mess up, all I have to do is go to the start menu again, hit replay save status over here, and now I'm back to full screen again. So anytime I want to test something, I can always just reset it. Now remember, I had talked about the shortcut settings before. As you can see here, I've actually set 2 of my shortcuts using the function key to save status and replay status. So I don't even need to go to this menu screen to be able to access these. For example, if I want to test perfect cross-up distance over here, I can now use my shortcut to save the state and then reload the state and try again. Reload the state and try again. So you can see how convenient the shortcut settings are. Now, I have noticed a bug here. We'll see if this actually shows up in the actual retail version. But when you load the save state again, make sure you hold the button down a little bit longer, because if I tap both buttons too quickly, as you can see, sometimes the shortcut button actually registers and activates even though you've only pressed it once. So if you just hold the buttons down a little bit, that guarantees it doesn't happen. Or if you press the 2 buttons at the exact same time, you're almost guaranteed to never have that happen. So just hit the function button and the shortcut button at the same time. One more thing to add here is that you can actually save more than one state now in this training mode. So as you can see, the Y button there, which is of course the medium punch button on the default settings, if I press this, I have 3 different slots that I can actually save the save state to. So if you want to have more than one save state, this is something that you can access here, which is really, really convenient. Again, if you look here at the menu in the shortcut settings, you can also change the save status slot here with a function button. So I can turn this on, press the confirm button, set it to function, and then I'll set it to medium punch here. Press start to get out, back all the way out. And now I can change between the slots that I am saving the state. So I can easily jump between save states and save to those states and load these states as well. So again, depending on what you're doing in training mode, shortcut buttons are very, very convenient. Obviously, you're going to have your command list over here, which will show you all your moves, and beautifully they actually show you examples of all these moves and a little bit of descriptions, and there's super arts, unique attacks, throws, and of course the common moves. You can also check your modern controls over here by switching the page as well, using the left and the right trigger here. Pretty straightforward. Controller settings, very straightforward here as well. You can set your buttons over here. One of the tricky things, however, is that if your buttons are set to random stuff like so, and you try to set your buttons, you can actually tap the buttons and it'll always advance. But if you notice, every time you hit a button that's already assigned to what you want, it freezes on that button. So for example, if I want to reassign these two buttons, I can easily hit my buttons, and then the third button won't advance it because it's already set to the correct button. This is a little bit of a user experience fix that I think that Capcom should implement at some point, but we'll see what happens on the release copy of the game. But outside of that, pretty straightforward here, button settings here. And then hit start to exit that. You can test the settings over here, of course, as usual. And then you can also back out here. The options here on the screen just access the standard options that you can get to pretty much outside of the training mode screen as well. So these are all of the game options here that you give access to. Of course, some of them you can't actually change while you're in game, but it is nice being able just to have access to some of these things very, very easily here from this. And of course, restoring default settings here. So the first page to the right of basic settings is environment settings. This is where you're going to end up starting your character, and as you can see over here, you can choose between center, right, or left. You can set which side your character will appear on. You can even change the speed of the game so that you can actually practice things at a slower speed. You can also simulate input delay here and practice for maybe less optimal network situations here. You can also do a quick change of which characters are in the training mode over here. As you can see, if you click on this, you can just choose any of the characters really quick. And if you pick the character, you see you have the option for the colors and the control type and the button preset. Hit the confirm button again, and then when you back out, it'll load in your new character fairly quickly, I might add, so well done to that. So example, if I want to go back to Ryu and the first color, classic controls, I hit that, back out, and voila, back to Ryu. Very, very convenient, quick change, allows you to test things on multiple characters very, very quickly. Another setting that you can find over here, you'll see, is the character specific settings. This is really convenient for you if you want to test specific setups. For example, if you look right next to Kimberly's drive meter, she has the spray can count. So every time she throws one and then she throws another one, you get to 0, and then you throw another one, she has to reload, and then you're back to 1, etc., etc. Sometimes if you just want to keep training with 2 or 1 cans, it's really annoying to remember to have to reset the state like this. So in character specific settings, for example, as you can see here for Kimberly, you can actually set it permanently to 1 or 0 or infinite. So for example, if I set it to infinite here, no matter what I do with the cans, you'll see that it instantly switches back to 2. So this lets you test settings a lot easier that way, test situations without having to worry about these kind of situations. So for example, when Manon comes out, you can probably set it so that it's always at level 1 throw metal count. So you want to test level 1 damages. Jamie, you can set him to specific drink levels the entire time. You can also have Jury always be in Feng Shui engine, her level 2 super, etc., etc. So very nice settings here, very Guilty Gear-esque. The first time I seen something like this was in Guilty Gear, so really appreciate it that they put this here in Street Fighter. course, you can also change the background stage that you happen to be in. You don't have to train in the training room over here if you don't want to. So that's always a nice option, assuming that the music player will let you pick whatever background music that you want eventually as well, which is another wonderful option. Of course, there's always just reverting this page's changes. And that is the environment settings. 2 pages right of basic settings is the dummy settings. This is where you're going to find the very, very standard settings that you're used to in most training modes. For example, you could just turn the training dummy into the CPU and set them how difficult they are. You can also change it so that they can be controlled by a second controller. Here you can change it so if they're standing, crouching, or jumping. Now you can also set it so that there is a counter hit regularly. This is just normal counter hit. You can force it so that every hit is always going to be a counter hit. Now keep in mind, in Street Fighter 6 there's a difference between counter hit and punish counter, so there is also the option to set it to always punish counter. Then of course there is the option for random, and as you can see there, the little Y button shows up, which again is medium punch, and if you hit that, and you'll see all the 3 different kind of hits here in this menu. There's normal hits, counter hits, and punish counter. Think of this essentially as setting the probability here. If you set all the numbers equal here, it'll basically be equal probability. So if I hit the opponent here, you'll see punish counter, counter hit, punish counter, regular hit, pretty much at an even keel over here. But if I hit the medium punch button again and set, for example, counter hit to 10, now what you'll actually see is counter hit will occur significantly more times than any of the other options here. So if you want to skew it into certain probabilities, you can actually use this setting over here to set it. You can even set it to 0 so that it never happens at all. So on random, you only get between normal hits and counter hits. For example, if I set punish counter to 0, which again is a very useful and practical setting to set it to here for testing frame trap situations, for example. Over here in block, very standard options here. Block, block, no block, which means you can just beat them up. Block everything, so you can test block strings. Block count. This is actually really important here. For example, if I want to test a situation where what the opponent can do after, for example, they block crouching light punch in the fireball here, you'll notice that he actually gets hit by the fireball because the crouching light punch doesn't cause enough block stun to force the opponent to block both hits. You now have the ability to set how many times the dummy has to block before they stop blocking. So if I set this to 2, now he'll block both of the hits and not the third hit. And this is actually really, really nice. Now keep in mind, you can wait long enough and the status will reset and they'll block again. But in a quick sequence like that, being able to set the CPU to the training dummy to block a specific amount of moves before they actually get hit is a very, very useful thing to have for many reasons as you get into much more advanced training mode labbing sessions. Block after first hit just basically means to test to make sure that you actually do the combo right. So for example, if you're practicing this combo and you do it too late, you'll see that the computer blocks in between. So this is a good way to test to make sure you have your combo timing down, because if your combo timing is off, they will start blocking in the middle of your combo. Random, of course, is pretty much what you expect it to be. The computer will the training demo will block at random, as you can see over here. So you can test things like hit confirms and such. So again, another very, very useful option. So if you look under block settings here, there's a bunch of settings over here that are disabled currently, but as you can see, as you move to these options here, they become enabled. We've already talked about what block count is, but a lot of these other settings, for example, like switch block, this is a setting that determines whether or not the computer, the training dummy, will block moves that have to be blocked low or have to be blocked high. this is actually separate from the dummy behavior here, unlike Street Fighter V, which is actually really convenient here. So as you see here, they will basically only stand block moves, or only crouch block moves, or again, you could set it to random. But this way, if you set them to only crouch block moves here, you can see that they'll actually block, they'll crouch block this, but if I actually do an overhead, he actually won't block it. But unlike Street Fighter V, because it's separate from this dummy behavior, I can actually set them to only crouch block moves while they're standing, so I can still hit them with a jump kick, for example. So it's kind of neat to have it separated that way. Also makes it a little bit clear how this option works, so that's really nice. And as you can see here, there's also a block type. This is block, this is also drive parry, and this is also perfect parry. And again, a random option. So as you play the game, you'll learn about drive parry and drive and perfect parries. So regular block here, of course, is just this. If you set them to drive parry, they'll always drive parry here. So now you can actually see the behavior of the opponent after they drive parry a move. And then if you set them to perfect parry, they will always perfect parry in here. So you can test scenarios like this, for example, using these options here, and setting it to random lets you test different options and such, but it does exactly what you will expect it to do. So the V reversals in this game are called drive reversals. These are the attacks that you can do out of block stun. So if you're blocking attack, you can come out of block stun and hit the opponent with a drive reversal. Here you can see currently it's set to inactive, but if I set it to active here, I can have it so that the opponent drive reversals the instant I actually hit them. Like so. And so this way you can test to see what you can block and when you can't block, for example. But when you fight against humans, they don't necessarily drive reversal right away a lot of the time, so you can add delay to it so it doesn't actually drive reversal right away. You can see a little bit of a delay timing here. So for example, if I set it to 20 frames, you see how late that drive reversal comes out, but if I set it to 0, it comes out instantaneously. The other one too is that drive reversal activation count. Like block count that we saw above, you can set the CPU to wait until a certain number of blocks before it actually does a drive reversal. So if I set it to 3 and I do this, nothing happens. However, if there are 3 hits in a quick succession, the 3rd hit will trigger the drive reversal. This again lets you test different scenarios. So again, all these options are very, very nice for labbing situations once you start becoming an expert labber here in training mode. Finally, there's throw escape, which is active, inactive, or random. Pretty standard here again. If you set them to active, they will always tech your throws. And if you set it to random, it'll be 50-50 between which one. And then recover, this is the wake up timing over here. So, or wake up positioning, I should say, because unlike Street Fighter V, recovering in place and recovering backwards is the same frame data. Remember that recovering in place just basically means you get up right there on the spot. And if I change you to recovers backwards, you'll actually roll backwards when you get up. Changing this to random allows you to react to either one of these situations here. But again, very important to note that the frame data is exactly the same with backwards and with recover in place here in Street Fighter 6, unlike it was in Street Fighter V. And so those are all of the dummy settings that you have available to yourself. So 3 pages to the right of basic settings is the recording settings. This is going to be one of the more complicated pages here. Of course, you're thinking to yourself, what's this more complicated? Oh my goodness. But as you can see here, there are arrows next to the record option over here. That means if I actually hit left and right on the controller, as you can actually see here, you can see the difference between record and replay options. Now for the record option, depending on the slot, you can pick which one of these you want to record an action for the dummy to perform so that you can play it back anytime that you want to. The number in the middle is the length of the recording. So currently right now, I have in slot 1 a recording that lasts 197 frames. So for example, if I jab and then end the recording here, you can see now it says 134 frames because I've re-recorded it as something else. So as you can see here, there are 8 different slots. So you can record 8 different actions. If you remember, in Street Fighter V, it was limited to 5 actions. Here in Street Fighter VI, you have 8 actions. Now, if you actually look down here, there's start recording settings. There's auto and input. Auto means that as soon as I hit the button, it's recording, as you can see in the top left of the screen. It's recording and it's showing you the number of frames. However, if I actually set it to on input, as you can see, it says preparing up there, and it won't start recording until I start moving the character or until I press a button. So that way, if you want to record, for example, Luke dashing right away, I don't have to dash the instant I come out of the menu over here. It'll wait until I actually start tapping, and now if I play this back, he'll just dash right away. So on input is generally, I think, a better setting to use. Now countdown settings here as well, you can also set it to that it will give you a warning before it starts. So if I set it to 5 seconds and on auto, you'll actually see, for example, if I go and try to record slot 1, it'll go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, start recording. And you see that in the middle of the screen. It also even works for on input as well. So if I go over here, and as soon as I touch a controller, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, start recording. Now, what gets a little bit tricky here is when we go into the replay options. As you can see here, there are all of the same settings over here. All of the things that you've recorded will show up here in the replay option. Here you see on the left side over there, there's the Y button again, which is the medium punch button that you could set these things to on or off. You can actually select which of these recorded options that you have that will play back. So for example, I can turn on these 5 so that when I play back the computer reaction, it will only be one of these 5 actions that will happen. Of course, I can set it to just 1, and so that one will happen every single time. Or if I set to 2 of them, it'll be 50-50. But even if you have 2 options here, you can actually set the probability at which these actually occur. Again, if you use the confirm button, which is a light kick on the default settings here, you'll see you can actually change the rate at which these will occur. So you can set it to 2 options, for example, but one of them will happen far more frequently than the other. And if you turn on all the options, you can set all these things to different rates that you want to. So you can actually go through all sorts of craziness over here. So the question comes down to, how do you replay one of these? There doesn't seem to be any option to replay. Well, if you look over here, it says start recording replay. This, I'm gonna have to say, is awful language here. They mean to start to replay the recording. This actually sounds like this is you starting to record what you want to replay. But if you look, if I hit start recording replay, it's actually playing back what I'm doing in slot 1. So for example, if I go back here and on slot 1, record Luke doing a DP, if I go to replay and I have slot 1 turned on, start recording replay is actually play the replay. Again, this is not to actually start recording the replay. This is to start replaying the recording. Now, again, back on basic settings, shortcut settings, you have all these buttons over here for playing recording, start the dummy recording, play the dummy recording. You could set these all to function buttons again. For example, function and light kick. You can set this to function and medium kick. And now when you're actually in this area over here, I can actually start the recording, by using the shortcut. Well, actually, I did that last time, so let's actually do a different one over here. Let's do Fireball. And now if I want to replay it, I can use the other shortcut and it'll actually replay this way, so I don't have to navigate the menus over and over and over again. So if you look at the bottom over here, you see one of the options here for repeat replay. This is another user experience issue that I have here. This only applies to start recording replay here in the menu. If I turn it off and I do this, you'll see that Luke throws the fireball and he stops. The replay green bar that you saw on the top left goes away. However, if I use the shortcut to replay, this always loops, no matter what, because you have to manually turn it off by inputting the same shortcut input. So unfortunately, a little bit of a user experience that hopefully will be changed or patched in the future. We will see, especially with the actual release copy of the game. Now, if you actually look over here, replay info display over here says disable only for random playback. The reason why this exists here is because if you set the computer CPU here to do something, you'll see that it says slot 1 at the top over there. Well, if you're trying to test your reactions for multiple options, you actually don't want to see what slot the action is coming from, because that actually gives you an indication of which randomized option was chosen. So by selecting disable right here, you can have a true reaction here without any giveaways. So if you see that I set this to on over here and then I turn on the randomizer, you'll see it says slot 3, slot 3, slot 2, slot 1. And so you can actually see which one's coming. So you can just turn it off if you want, but you can also set it here to disable only for the random playback. So now on random playback, I don't know which of the 5 options the CPU is doing until they start that option. That is good for testing your reactions to a lot of different things that you've set the CPU dummy to do. Keep in mind that left-right switching between replay and record only works when your cursor is on one of these options here. If you're down here, left-right will actually change the option instead of the page. So one of the most important things that you want to be able to lab in training mode is to set the computer to react to things that you do in certain ways. So for example, I want the CPU to, after they block, to try to crouching light punch me. So I have him set to block all in the dummy settings page over here, and he's gonna block everything. So I want the Luke training dummy to crouch light punch at me right away. So there are settings for that. 4 pages to the left of basic settings or 4 pages to the right of basic settings, because it's right in the middle. So either one of them, if you reset 1, 2, 3, 4, you end up in the reversal settings page here. And what you'll actually see here, if you hit left and right, you have 3 different options here. There's block reversal, there is reversal after damage, and there is also wake up reversal. Fortunately, all 3 of these pages, the settings under here, all work the same. It's just the situation in which these reversals actually occur. For example, block reversal will be after the computer blocks. Reversal after damage will cause the computer to do something after they get hit. And then wake up reversal will be setting the computer to do something right when they get up off of the ground. So let's test block reversal here. So just like in the recording setting, you're gonna see that there are all these slots that, using the Y button, aka the medium punch button, I could turn them on or off. So this is the exact same thing as the recording settings, except you're setting this so that they play at a specific time, at reversal situations. Otherwise, they work very, very similarly. So here, if I hit the Y button, I can turn them on or off. And as you can see there, there's also the delay option. If I hit the X button over here, which is light punch, I can actually set them to delay a certain amount of time, or I can also set it to how many times I want them to block before they actually perform the action. If I hit the confirm button over here, that will actually allow me to start recording what I want to do. And as you can see here, instead of having to record it like we did with the replay, they just list everything that the character can actually do. And you hit LB and RB to switch between the pages for all the different options here. So for example, I said I wanted to test crouching light punch. If I select crouching light punch, you'll see in slot 1, block reversal is set to crouching light punch. I hit the medium punch button, aka Y, to turn it on. And now when the computer blocks my attack, he responds with the crouching light punch right away. Again, if I use the light punch button for X over here and change the delay settings to, let's say, 20 frames over here, it'll wait 20 frames before he actually does the crouching light punch. You can see how much slower it is than if I have it set to 0. Now, the count over there, if I switch it to, for example, 3, you'll notice he doesn't light punch at all. The only way that he'll actually respond is if he blocks 3 things. There you see the light punch right there. And again, it could be any 3 things that you want it to be. There you go. So that's what the count is here for. And again, this is really good for testing things if they're punishable or not. So for example, if I make him block a crouching heavy punch and I hold block, as you can see, he will crouching light punch as fast as possible, and it actually punishes Ryu. So you can test whether things are safe on block or not if you aren't comfortable using the frame data bar at the bottom of the screen. You can do it very organically this way as well. You can also use it to test to see what kind of things that you can do to punish them very badly. So for example, if I use heavy kick, which is plus on block, I can actually respond with another button afterwards with my own crouching light punch and beat him. And so I can set him up and learn to see if I can practice some counter hit setups over here into some nice combos. I just wanted to add that if you look at all of the options that you can get the dummy to perform as a reversal option, one of the pages is actually the same 8 recordings that you can record on the recording settings page. That means you can have the dummy perform pretty much anything you want as a reversal, as long as you record it on the recording settings page first. So again, you can also set it up so it's randomized between all the 5 different options here. Although it seems like on the reversal settings, you do not have the ability to set the probability like you did with the recording settings. And again, same thing. Reversal after damage. All of these settings are the exact same thing. You see slot 1 is set to vertical jump. So if I hit the CPU, he'll vertical jump afterwards. There's no count here because they don't care. It's just you hit them and then they react with a certain thing. So they do not have the count option here, but they still have the delay option. And then finally, wake up reversal, exact same thing. If I change to OD rising uppercut, which is the overdrive rising uppercut, if I throw him on wake up, he will EX DP out of that situation because I have it set here. But if I set 2 of them on like this, then I do this. Sometimes he'll DP, and then sometimes he should forward jump, like so. So you can actually set the CPU to do one of the 2 random options. And I got challenged! Okay, perfect timing. Now 3 pages to the left of the basic settings page is the parameter settings. This seems pretty self-explanatory over here. You can change how much life you have here in increments of 10% here. You can change how much life the CPU has. You can change whether or not the setting actually refills or if it stays exactly where it is. So for example, if I set it to fixed at 50%, no matter what I do, as you can see, their life stays at 50% the entire time. So you'll notice that there is a Y button options right there for yourself. This is just to change it so it's increments of 10 or increments of 1. That's it. That's all this is. Very, very straightforward. If you want to be super exact, you can change it to 1%, or you can just set it here for 10%. Obviously, the same thing for here as well. And then, of course, there's standard here, which just basically means as you beat up on the dummy over here, they'll never get their life back here, as you can see. So you can actually just do, practice your combos on them. And then you can actually even kill them off in this way too. You can actually kill them, and then it'll just reset you back. If you hit the start button, it goes a little bit quicker, but this is to help you test sequences, see how much damage things are doing, showing off, full kill sequences, etc., just to see how much damage it does in a real life situation. Now, one thing you'll notice here that I didn't talk about the first time is if I go back to refill over here, a Y button appears for the option next to the refill option, which means if I hit Y, aka medium punch, I have the ability to set the delay at which the meter actually comes back. So by default it's at 2 frames, but if I set it to 0, you'll actually see that the guy's life comes back almost instantaneously. However, I can set it to 60 frames, for example, and yes, it wraps around. 60 is the max over here. Now if I hit him, you see how long it takes for the life to come back. The yellow part actually disappears before the life actually recovers. So you can actually change the timing for this. It really doesn't affect anything gameplay-wise, but for presentation, you'll be able to see it. So maybe if you do a combo, it gives you more time for you to look up and be like, oh, it did that much damage before it refills. So the fact that they even let you tweak that is pretty crazy. Now, the drive gauge. Obviously, if you know how the drive gauge works, this is how you do all of your moves, like drive parries, like overdrives, everything. You can set it to what you want at start by default. So I can set it to 3. As you can see over here, it's at 3. Even when I build it up, it resets back to 3. Basically, if you set it to this way, it's always going to default back to the number that you have set here. So even if I am at 6 and I do an EX, it comes back instantly to 6. Obviously, you can do that for either player here. Now, if you set it to 0, you notice that it's literally just a pixel left in there. However, if I hit the Y button here again, the options over here, I can actually change it to true 0 to true burnout over here. And now I am in burnout. And so you can actually practice things with you in burnout, or you can actually practice things with your opponent in burnout. So that way you can practice things against them. Now, the number will determine how far the timer is filled. So if I do this way, he's gonna have an empty timer, and I could just kind of start beating up here and practice what it's like fighting the opponent in burnout. Now you can see right here, drive recovery gauge, recovery settings is refill over here. And again, same thing. There's the Y button setting on how fast it refills. However, there's fixed here. So if I set it to fixed at 6, you can see I can sit here and do overdrive moves all day and it doesn't drain it at all. So in other words, I can just go ham and test whatever I want with as much drive gauge as I care about. So for example, I can do drive rush cancels. You normally can't do 3 drive rush cancels in a row, but if you set it to fixed, I certainly can. Then there's standard, and this is probably how you want to have it by default when you are labbing. So that way you can actually see how much drive gauge you're using. So I do recommend standard or refill with a slower timer, because at standard here, this way, you'll know if you do a combo with multiple drive rushes, for example, let's see. Then you actually see your meter being drained up there. Now for the super art gauge over here, this just tells you, do you have 3 bars? Do you have 0 bars? Do you have 1 bar? Do you have 2 bars? That's pretty straightforward. That's all the option is for here. So if you just want to have it set to 0, so, you know, for whatever reason you want to do it that way, for example, showing a video giving an example like, oh, here's how much damage I can do with 0 bars. You can set it to 0 bars to emphasize that point, for example. And of course, super gauge recovery setting, same thing, refill with the frame timing on the delay, fixed, keep it at that number or standard so that it just drains like normally and you have to build it up like normally. So again, most of the stuff here on parameter settings is pretty straightforward. Just look at it as health for the first 4 options, drive gauge for the next 4 options, and super art gauge for the next 4 options. And they're all essentially the same kind of setup on how to tweak them. And that's what parameter settings is for. So 2 pages left of basic settings is the screen display settings. If you've been watching this video, you'll notice that the whole entire time I've been playing this, I've had the virtual controller on there. I've had the frame data bars at the bottom of the screen, which are strangely missing all of a sudden. And that's because by default, a lot of those things are off. And as you can see, you can turn on a lot of these display settings here. So for example, the input history and the attack data is on right now. So the attack data is the 3 bars in the middle of the screen with damage, combo damage, and attack type. Input history, as you can see on the left side, shows all of my inputs over here, which is very valuable. Make sure you have that on almost always by default, because a lot of times it can help you see what you're doing as a mistake when you try to input things. Studying your input history oftentimes is very helpful. You can also turn on the input history of player 2 only, or have both of them on, for example, if you're playing against a friend, you know, in training mode and you want to have both of your input histories on. The frame meter, I would recommend having on at all times, because knowing the frame data of your attacks is going to be very, very useful. If you do not know what this frame bar is down here, check out one of my other videos. I have a video only on explaining this frame bar, but you should have it there for the most part. Command completion display. This is an interesting one. It's on by default, but if I do a special move like a fireball, you can see at the bottom left of the screen it says success, and it shows you whether you did it or not correctly. If I turn it off, it doesn't show up there at all. I'm not 100% sure what the purpose of this is. Maybe just for confirmation for beginners. I personally cannot think of a use case for this, but if you can think of a use case, please let me know in the comments below. But for the most part, I'm not sure. Now, action timing display is actually kind of nice over here. That creates that little yellow bar above my head. And what this actually shows you is when you are stuck and cannot do anything. Right now, Ryu is in what I call a neutral state. I have the choice between attacking, dashing, crouching, jumping, drive parrying, drive impacting, throwing, whatever. Neutral state. I have the ability to do whatever. Anytime I commit to a move, you see that bar actually fills up, meaning that I cannot do anything else until that bar empties. So what that bar is actually showing you is when you are free to move. And it's always going to be the same timing. The reason for that is that whenever you throw out a move, you can see the bar draining and get an idea of the timing. So for example, if I want to do something like heavy kick into crouching medium kick like this, I can look at that bar and kind of see when it's about to empty and hit the button. So I have a visual cue to me to learn what time to hit the button so that I can actually produce the follow-up at the right timing. That's what that little action timing bar is for. Now, there's also that little nook, that little line going through the end of it on the very left side. What's that all about? Well, Street Fighter 6 also employs the same thing that Street Fighter 5 did in the input buffer. So in other words, whenever I hit a button, it actually repeats that button for 2 more frames. And so as a result, if you hit a button 2 frames or 1 frame too early, it will still come out. That is what that line up there is indicating, is the early period. If I hit the button right when it reaches that yellow line, even though I'm technically not recovered from the move yet, it will still come out for me at the fastest moment possible. So in other words, kind of like a Gears of War reload thing, if you hit the button anywhere in between that little horizontal line and the end of the bar, you will get a successful, instant, first frame possible follow-up attack. So for example, if I want to leak after a medium punch, seeing the bar drain really fast tells me I have to hit the next button quickly. But if I want to link after, for example, a heavy kick, that bars tells me that I have to wait a little bit longer because it takes a little bit longer for it to start draining. So that little bar there does help you perfect your link timing, or even, for example, if I want to hit a button and then dash afterwards, I can also complete the input for the dash in that little box as well. So that's a nice thing to have on most of the time, and in training mode, if you have it on, it very rarely gets in the way. Now, cancel timing display is a little interesting here. So moves obviously have the ability to be canceled. You've seen me in a couple of times in this video where I've done, for example, crouching medium kick into fireball. Well, if you turn on cancel display, timing display here, when you can cancel your move into a special move, you will glow red, as you can see here. So as long as I hit the button for the special move while I am red, it will come out. This goes for modern controls too. So heavy punch, you see how the red is there a lot longer than that one. So that means I actually have a lot more time to cancel my heavy punch into a follow-up than a crouching medium kick, as you can see by the cancel window color here. And you'll also notice that some moves, like Ryu's heavy kick, will not glow red at all. And that is because, yes, sure enough, this move cannot be canceled. And remember, this is the same thing. The cancel works the same for drive impact and canceling into drive rushes as well. So keep that in mind. But having the red on shows you what your window is for canceling. So in other words, if I try to cancel a crouching medium kick into a fireball, and you can kind of feel it that you're hitting the button after you stop glowing red, you know you're doing it too late. So that teaches you to try to do the fireball motion with the button sooner so you can hit the button while you are glowing red. It's a nice thing to have on. For me personally, as someone who's played Street Fighter forever, I don't need to have it on, so I usually have it off. And then of course the virtual controllers, you can do 1 player, 2 player, or both of them. But if you put them on, you'll see your inputs down over there. This is really useful for tutorial videos and things like that, so you can actually show people what you're doing. Also, if you're just, you want to see it, because it just helps be able to visualize it better than the input display all the way on the left side. That's a nice thing to have on over here as well. But that's all that happens here in the screen display settings. It is literally all the options that you can have, all the UI elements that you can put onto the screen. The last page, which is one left from the basic settings page, is the simple training settings. This is kind of your tutorial section over here. You can pick a lot of these different options here, for example, for practicing anti-air. So if I select this over here and I apply settings, it will set the computer up to jump at me a bunch of times so that I can try to practice my anti-airs on him. So you can learn what's a good button. You can even find good normals to anti-air, different things to anti-air at different ranges, etc., etc. The interesting thing about this is all it's actually doing is setting up pre-set up recorded things into the slots and playing them back for you. So a lot of these simple training things are literally the game setting up the training dumbing with a bunch of recordings and playbacks and almost kind of showing you how you can use those settings to set up ways to train yourself. So even though I picked that option, it's not a separate thing. It just literally sets him to Ryu, to fight my Ryu, and then records a bunch of preset recordings and plays them at random for you to practice. But that's what all those are. So again, one page left of the basic settings is all these things over here. Standard CPU battles, throw escape practice, whiff punish practice, drive impact defense practice. And then of course there is the frame meter and U. This is just a screen here that shows you how to read that frame data bar. Again, if you want more details on this and more detailed explanations on this, I will have a separate video just about the frame meter bar. So please check that video out. Look for, just do a search for frame meter, Street Fighter 6 training mode frame meter, and you should be able to find this here on this channel as well. So the last thing that you'll find on the simple training pages is save training settings and load training settings. This is literally allowing you to save everything on all the pages, except I think the characters that you can play here. These characters will not be saved with it, but all the other settings can be saved. So for example, I have the dummy setting to no block right now. So if I come over here and I head to save training settings, I can save it. Then I can go to this setting and change him to all block and let's say crouching, for example. So now he's crouching and he's blocking everything. Now, if I go back to simple training settings and click load training settings, it'll bring back all of those settings. He is standing and he is no longer blocking. So if you have just a default setting that you want to have, this is a good way to save it and be able to load it anytime after you change all your other settings and go like, oh my gosh, I don't remember what's in all of these slots. Let me just load this and clean slate. So that's a nice option. And of course, as you can see, there's the Y button there. If I hit the Y button, that's next to the slot, which of course is medium punch. There are 3 slots that you can record all of your settings over here. So again, very convenient. If you missed it at the beginning, the reason why I've told you the number of pages away from basic settings, all of these options are, every time you want to find one of these pages, your best option is to hit LB and RB at the same time to go back to basic settings no matter where you are, and then hit the number of buttons to the page that you know. Like I said, I know parameters is always 3 left of basic settings. So no matter what page I'm on, if I know if I want to go to parameter settings, I don't have to go shoot. Is it 4 to the left or 3 to the right or where is it? I can always reset it. 1, 2, 3 left and boom, I'm at the parameter settings. I know the dummy settings is 2 pages to the right of basic settings. Reset 1, 2. And here I am at the dummy settings. It's generally the best way to navigate through these menus. So again, the reason why I've repeated that again here at the end is because I think it's a very, very valuable thing to know. And of course, one last best thing about the reset to basic settings page is it defaults you to end training session. So anytime you want to leave training mode, reset, end training mode, very, very easy. So that's pretty much all of the training mode options here. And again, the training mode is really robust. And while it may seem intimidating, the ability to have all these options does allow you to do so much and train so many situations. Honestly, the best players of fighting games spend more time, potentially more time in training mode than in actual matches oftentimes, because they are just labbing and researching. And having all of these options, having the shortcuts to gain easy access to a lot of these things is very, very nice. This training mode is one of the best training modes that I have seen in a mainstream fighting game in basically forever. It is a fantastic training mode. I love it, and you should definitely learn to take advantage of all these options as you figure out you need them. Don't try to use them all at once. Don't try to learn what they all do right away. take your time, know what you want to do. And when you're in the middle of the training mode and you're like, boy, I really wish I could make the computer DP after they block 2 moves, you can. And so hopefully you'll be able to come back to this video, review it, and remember how to do it. Or you'll be like, wait, I remember seeing that video, so I remember it was on this page. Yes, this is how I do it. So again, very useful thing to know. Learning how to use training mode is a very valuable weapon in becoming a stronger player. So I hope this video helped out. And I hope this video helps you understand training mode. And again, don't be afraid to use training mode. It is one of the most important aspects of fighting games. And hope you enjoy Street Fighter 6, and I'll see you online in some battles. So take care. Thank you. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. You can also find my streams on twitch.tv/jchenzor, where I like to teach people how to play fighting games. So come in, ask questions, and I'll be glad to help.